his eyes blue and watery. He nibbled at a krenoj impaled delicately on a two-tined iron fork. "Tell me," the Hertug shouted suddenly, "why you should not be killed at once." "We are your slaves, Hertug, we are your slaves," everyone in the room shouted in unison, waving their hands in the air at the same time. Jason missed the first chorus, but came in on the second. Only Mikah did not join in the chant and wave, speaking instead in a solitary voice after the Pledge of Allegiance was completed. "I am no man's slave." The commander of the soldiers swung his thick bow in a short arc that terminated on the top of Mikah's head. He dropped stunned to the floor. "You have a new slave, O Hertug," the commander said. "Which is the one who knows the secrets of the caroj?" the Hertug asked, and Snarbi pointed at Jason. "Him there, O mightiness. He can make caroj. He can make the monster that burns and moves them. I know because I watched him do it. He also made balls of fire that burned the D'zertanoj and many other things. I brought him to be your slave so that he could make caroj for the Perssonoj. Here are the pieces of the caroj we traveled in after it was consumed by its own fire." Snarbi shook the tools and burnt fragments out onto the floor, and the Hertug curled his lip at them. "What proof is this?" he asked, and turned to Jason. "These things mean nothing. How can you prove to me, slave, that you can do the things he says?" Jason entertained briefly the idea to deny all knowledge of the matter, which would be a neat revenge against Snarbi, who would certainly meet a sticky end for causing all this trouble for nothing. But he discarded the thought as fast as it came. Partly for humanitarian reasons. Snarbi could not help being what he was, but mostly because he had no particular desire to be put to the question. He knew nothing about the local torture methods, and he wanted to keep it that way. "Proof is easy, Hertug of all the Perssonoj, because I know everything about everything. I can build machines that walk, that talk, that run, fly, swim, bark like a dog, and roll on their backs. You will build a caroj for me?" "It could be arranged, if you have the right kind of tools I could use. But I must first know what is the specialty of your clan, if you know what I mean. Like the Trozelligoj make caroj, and the D'zertanoj pump oil. What do your people do?" "You cannot know as much as you say if you do not know the glories of the Perssonoj." "I come from a distant land, and as you know, news travels slowly around these parts." "Not around Perssonoj," the Hertug said scornfully, and thumped his chest. "We can talk across the width of the country and always know where our enemies are. We can send magic on wires to kill, or magic to make light in a glass ball, or magic that will pluck the sword from an enemy's hand and drive terror into his heart." "It sounds like your gang has the monopoly on electricity, which is good to hear. If you have some heavy forging equipment—" "Stop!" the Hertug ordered. "Leave. Out. Everyone except the Sciuloj. Not the new slave, he stays here," he shouted when the soldiers grabbed Jason. The room emptied, and the handful of men who remained were all a little long in the tooth, and each wore a brazen, sunburst-type decoration on his chest. They were undoubtedly adept in the secret electrical arts, and they fingered their weapons and grumbled with unconcealed anger at Jason's forbidden knowledge. The Hertug signaled him to continue. "You used a sacred word. Who told it to you? Speak quickly or you will be killed." "Didn't I tell you I knew everything? I can build a caroj, and given a little time I can improve on your electrical works, if your technology is on the same level as the rest of this planet." "Do you know what lies behind the forbidden portal?" the Hertug asked, pointing to a barred, locked and guarded door at the other end of the room. "There is no way you can have seen what is there. But if you can tell me what lies beyond it, I will know you are the wizard that you claim you are." "I have a very strange feeling that I have been over this ground once before," Jason sighed. "All right, here goes. You people here make electricity, maybe chemically, though I doubt if you would get enough power that way, so you must have a generator of some sort. That will be a big magnet, a piece of special iron that can pick up other iron, and you spin it around fast next to some coils of wire, and out comes electricity. You pipe this through copper wire to whatever devices you have, and they can't be very many. You say you talk across the country. I'll bet you don't talk at all, but send little clicks and dots and dashes. I'm right, aren't I?" The foot shuffling and rising buzz from the adepts was a sure sign that he was hitting close. "I have an idea for you. I think I'll invent the telephone. Instead of the old clickety clack, how would you like to really talk across the country? Speak into a gadget here and have your voice come out at the far end of the wire." The Hertug's piggy little eyes blinked greedily. "It is said that in the old days this could be done, but we have tried and have failed. Can you do this thing?" "I can, if we can come to some agreement first. But before I make any promises, I have to see your equipment." This brought the usual groans of complaint about secrecy, but in the end avarice won over taboo, and the door to the Holy of Holies was opened for Jason, while two of the sciuloi with bared and ready daggers stood at his sides. At almost the same instant Jason looked in through the door he heard the sound. Now, the reaction of the human body, while remarkably fast, needs certain finite measures of time, and have been measured over and over again with a great deal of accuracy. The commands of the brain, speedy as they may be, must be carried by sluggish nerves and put into operation by inert lumps of muscle. Therefore, to say that Jason's reactions were instantaneous is to tell a lie, or at least exaggerate. Only to his watchers did his actions appear to take place that fast. They were older and less alert, and had not had the advantage of Pyrran survival training. So to their point of view the sacred portal was opened and Jason vanished in a flurry of activity. Two lightning blows sent his guardians spinning, and before they had fallen to the floor their supposed captive was through the door, and it was slammed in their faces. Before the first dumbfounded person could jump forward the bolt grated home and the door was sealed. Things were a little more complex than that to Jason. When the door opened he had had a good view of the inside of the room, of a slave cranking the handle on a crude collection of junk that could only have been a generator. Thick wires looped across the room from the thing to a man who stood before some blades of copper, pushing at them with a wooden stick, while above his head fat sparks leaped the gap between two brassy spheres. As if to complete this illustration for a Bronze Age edition of First Steps in Electricity, another cable twisted up from the spark gap and vanished out a small window. The entire thing might have been labeled, "How to Generate a Radio Signal in the Crudest Manner." As Jason reached this conclusion in the smallest fraction of a second, and almost at the very same instant, he heard the sound. What he heard could have been distant thunder, an earthquake, a volcano, or some giant explosion. It rumbled and rolled, muffled by distance, yet still clear. It resembled none of these things to Jason, but made him think only of a high-altitude rocket or jet cleaving through the atmosphere. It must have been the juxtaposition of these two things occurring as they did at the same time, the view of the radio transmitter, no matter how crude, and the thought that there might be a civilized craft of some kind up there containing men who would come to his aid if he could only contact them. The idea was an insane one, but even as he realized that fact he was through the door and bolting it behind him. Perhaps he did it because he had been pushed around entirely too much and felt like pushing someone else for a change. In any case it was done, insane or not, and he might as well carry through. The generator slave looked up, startled, but when Jason glanced at him he lowered his eyes and kept cranking. The man who had been working the transmitter spun about, startled by the slam of the door and the muffled pounding and shouts that followed instantly from the other side. He groped for his dagger when he saw the stranger, but before it was clear of the scabbard Jason was on him, and after a few quick Pyrran infighting blows the man lost all interest in what was happening and slid to the floor. Jason straddled his body, picked the stick up, nodded to the slave who began cranking faster, and began to tap out a message. S-O-S, S-O-S, he sent first. Then, as fragments of code came back to him, he spelled out JASONENEEDFORHELP. He varied this a bit, repeated his name often, and tried other themes, appealing